Hello, welcome to Shad Life. I'm going to talk a little bit about my battle with sizing, right? I brought this up a lot on my channel, especially the reach number and things like that. So what I'm going to do today is I have the manual trainer here. I'm going to put different bikes in the stand and compare them because I have 3 bikes with slightly different geometry. So I'd say this geometry in my Haro Saguaro is very similar, and I'll pop them both in the stand. Well, I already have this one, but and we'll compare them. The difference being is the Saguaro is a hardtail and this is full suspension. So you can talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to take my Esker Smokey, which is also a size small, but it's got 420 millimeter chainstay length versus 425 on this, right? And the Saguaro, I keep forgetting, I think they're 420, 419, something like that. The Saguaro has a 27.5 rear wheel. This has a 29-inch rear wheel. The Smokey has a 29-inch rear wheel. So it'll be interesting to see the differences in how these feel in the manual trainer. And while I'm at it, I'll talk a little bit about sizing and why I like the size bikes I do. And for starters, I'm 5'7", 30-inch inseam. Before I get going, the reason I'm talking about this is I just watched GMBN. Blake was on there. I'll put the link to that video up in the corner. Blake was talking about sizing and should you size down, should you size up. He rides the different bikes and talks a lot about it. Really good, informative video. And one of the things I like about Blake is him and I have a similar riding style and preferences with bikes. He's a little bit taller than me, but yeah, really good video. So go ahead and watch that one either now or after this video or whatever. It's pretty informative, especially if you're looking for a new bike and trying to figure out what size you want, right? All right, let's go ahead and do this manual thing. So we're going to obviously start with the Norco, right? 420, 425 chainstay, 420 reach, right? So pretty poppy bike, but it does have 29-inch wheels front and rear. FYI, I am waiting for Wolftooth to come out with more GeoShift headsets that'll fit this bike. It's a 56 bottom, 44 top. They're out of stock, but they told me that they'll have those in stock sometime in March, which is fine because it's the middle of winter. I won't be riding this bike quite yet, but the reason I'm bringing that up is I will ride this bike in both configurations and talk about it this riding season. So if you want to see that kind of content, definitely subscribe, follow my channel, because I'm going to put a 27.5 on the rear, increase the head angle a degree, and so on, and test that out, see how much I like it. So let's go ahead and do this because I said I would. And so I'm going to get on this bike. We're going to feel, what does it feel like manually? And of course, I've manualed this a bunch. As you can see, it's in the trainer. I've got the little green thing that leaves my cranks free. See? And that's important to get the good, real feel of a manual. And then pull up the front end. Yeah, the front end comes up really easy. And I'm not actually going to practice manuals right now. I'm mostly just talking about how easy is the front end to bring up, right? And that can give me an idea of how much control I will have over the bike, right? Right? So pretty easy. So I'm going to go grab the Haro, put it in the stand, and then we'll compare. Okay, now I have the Haro Saguaro in the stand. Smaller rear wheel, 27.5. Shorter chainstay, 418, versus the Norco, which has 425. But aside from those two things, it's a 420 millimeter reach, same as the Norco. Go ahead and get it on here and try a couple of manuals. I don't have as tall of a bar on this bike as I do on there, and that does kind of affect it a little bit, but overall it's similar enough. So we're gonna go for it. Yep, okay. So there's kind of some interesting differences between suspension and hardtail. Like when I go to pull up, I feel that suspension compress here, I don't. So it's actually like just a little bit more pull to get the front wheel out, which you wouldn't think would be the case. I mean, now that I've done it a few times, yeah, it feels very similar. Of course, I have a lower handlebar on this bike too, so. Oh, yeah. So, very similar. I'm curious to know what the Esker Smokey is going to feel like now, because that's got 10 millimeter more reach and quite a bit longer chainstay compared to this bike. It has 22 millimeter longer chainstay, which I think is going to make a big difference. Plus, it has a 29-inch rear wheel. So, yeah, let's go swap out to that bike. All right, here we are. Let's lower the seat. The wheelbase of this bike is longer than both the Haro and the Norco, which is kind of funny. So I actually had to slide the manual trainer back some, so my front tire doesn't hit my Zwift setup over there, which is kind of funny. So this, in my opinion, is my most aggressive geometry bike. Definitely a lot more fun at higher speeds and going downhill and things like that. It has that kind of, it's got a slacker head angle at 63 degrees, so it's kind of got that little bit of floppy feel at slower speeds in the steering. So it's going to be interesting to see how this bike feels in the manual trainer. I'm looking at my GoPro and I need to swap out my battery real quick before I do this. All right, fresh battery. Let's hop on and do this. Yeah, the front end feels really tall on this bike. It must be the stack height. It's also got a 160 millimeter fork versus the Haro is 140 millimeter. And the Norco has 140 millimeter too. So, wow. I haven't charged a battery in this thing for a long time, and it still shifts. Wow. All right. Yes, this has GX Access on it. Again, I keep swapping out the little device, so I have free pedaling. So let's go ahead and try a manual. I'm curious to know that taller front end might actually make this easier to pull up. We'll see. It's a little bit harder to pull up the front end, but not much. It fell a little sideways there. Oh, yeah, definitely, it's a bigger bike by far. I mean, it feels a lot bigger than my other two bikes. Pretty wild how just these few millimeters of difference feels so different on the bike. There we go. Okay. Yeah, harder to get the front end up. It's definitely feels like it has a bigger balance point though once I'm there. So needed some brake there. Try again. Oh, yeah. Whew. Definitely more work on this bike. Yeah. Oh, obviously need to practice my manuals more, but a little bit more work on this bike to pull up the front end and stuff. So why does this all make a difference? Well, I'll talk about it. Okay, so how I gauge like the poppiness of a bike. Like if I am outside and I get on a bike and I want to see like how agile is it, how poppy it is. I don't have to go on the trail. I could just be out on the street. The couple of things I do is, first one, try to pop a manual. The harder it is to get the front wheel up, the less poppy the bike is going to be. So basically, the longer the chainstay, the longer the reach, things like that. Stack height does matter, but as you see here, even though the front end is taller on this bike than the other two, that longer chainstay and slightly longer reach still made it a little bit harder to pull up the front end. I say a little, it's very subtle, right? But so I do that. I get on the bike, I manual, and then I do a couple bunny hops, right? And if I do bunny hops and the bike tends to want to like land front wheel first or nosedive on me, then to me that's a sign the bike's less poppy. If I can bunny hop, level off the bike, and then land both wheels or rear wheel first, that tells me the bike's a little more agile. If I can bunny hop higher, relatively easier, versus have to really muscle it to get the bike higher, you know, that tells me whether a bike's less agile, right? And then there's the steering element of it. You can kind of go on the street and kind of do a few S-turns. How easy is it to kind of go and just do a couple of little quick switchy things back and forth? Well, this bike's more like a plow. It's like, right? Versus the other two, it's just super quick and nimble, right? There's reasons you might want one over the other. You might want a bike like this that's more stable for higher speed, more downhill oriented stuff. And that, you know, hardtail or full suspension, doesn't matter. I can get pretty gnarly on a hardtail. I don't feel like I need all that suspension travel in the rear to do, you know, steeper, gnarly downhill stuff. And I actually recommend people have a hardtail in their stable and ride it regularly, because that's where you're going to dial in your skills. But either way, the way the bike rides is going to be similar, right? Based on its geometry. So there's this trend now, long, low, slack, and it's all fine if you're talking enduro bikes or downhill bikes, bikes that are made to go fast downhill, right? But the bike industry is starting to make trail bikes go more towards the direction of enduro bikes, and I don't like that. Trail bikes need to stay in that neutral, well-rounded spot and not be more tailored towards downhill. Because if you want a bike that's more tailored to downhill, then get an enduro bike. If you want a bike that's more well-rounded, good mix of different types of trails, think Bentonville, think up here, upper Midwest, right? Places like that versus, you know, Sedona or Colorado or the PNW, right? So, and I'm talking U.S. If you're not from the U.S., hopefully you know those regions enough to know kind of the differences. But like Bentonville has a wide range of trail styles, but for the most part, a good, well-rounded, neutral riding bike is great. Trail bikes are perfect for Bentonville. Sure, you can ride an enduro bike there or a DH bike, but for the most part, a trail bike is going to be what you want, and you want it to be more well-balanced. You don't want it to start going to these extreme slack 63-degree head angles, super long frames, you know, longer chain stays, all of that stuff, right? And again, your height matters. I'm 5'7", 30-inch inseam. If you watch that video, GMBN, and hear what Blake talks about, he's an inch taller than me. You know, he tends to like mediums, right? You really can get a good, well-rounded idea of bike sizing and geometry and all that. My friend Jason, some of the nicer thing about more modern bikes now, especially in the last 5 years or so, is they actually finally make bikes big enough for really tall people. Like Jason's like 6'2", 6'4", I don't remember, but he's tall. and he likes 505 millimeter reach. We're at like we're at what, 85 millimeters of difference in opinion on what we like for reach, right? That's a huge variance, right? But I've ridden bikes 440, 450. I've ridden 460, 465 millimeter reach bikes. They are way too big for me. It's really hard for me to pull up the front end, things like that. It's just not the way I like bikes to be. Granted, if I was gonna bomb down gnarly downhill all day long and that's all I was gonna do, then maybe I might like that. But I feel like this bike right here would be the bike I would want for that. You know, 430 reach, 440 chainstay. Feels super stable, 63-degree head angle. It's a stable, solid bike for me. So there you have it. I recommend, especially if you're a newer rider and you're between sizes, to size down and work on your skills. Preferably get a hardtail first, because you'll learn a lot more with a hardtail. Plus, suspension is a lot of little funky little things that if you don't have it set up right, it can buck you, it can make your bike ride not ideally or whatever. A hardtail is much simpler to learn on. You don't have to worry about suspension in the rear and how it's set up and things like that. And trust me, a bike shop isn't going to, you have to find that one person that is the know-it-all person at that one particular bike shop, and you'd get lucky if you got to that person to set you up correctly. Bike shops, they have like a standard set of rules. They'll set your sag for you, things like that, but they don't work on your rebound. They don't work on your low speed, high speed compression, all that stuff, right? So you definitely are better off starting with a hardtail is kind of my point there. And then learning more, work on just the fork, and hopefully you get a hardtail that's got a simpler fork on it that just has, you know, like the air compression and rebound and doesn't have all this high speed, low speed stuff. You know, some of them have like off the top or negative air, all that stuff, right? Gets really complicated really fast. So there you have it. Kind of a fun little experiment. I haven't actually done this yet. And I can guarantee you if I put my BMX bike in here, that's just like, whew, the front end wants to just come right up and I'll want to fall backwards, right? So keep that in mind. I ride a 20-inch BMX bike still. So when I get on even a you know, twitchy mountain bike, it feels stable to me, right? So keep that stuff in mind. It's all about your preferences, your skills, your comfort level, all that stuff. So bigger bike, more stable. You're more of a passenger. The bike's going to do most of the stuff for you. Smaller bike, more agile, more fun in my opinion. You can throw it around, you have more control over it. And then you can find that kind of neutral bike that has a little bit of everything, right? So there you have it. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.